Hello, everyone, and welcome to Velosio's webinar, Leveraging Microsoft's Toolset to Protect Your Business from Cyber Attacks. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. There are a couple housekeeping items I'd like to mention before we begin the presentation. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit them through the GoToWebinar question box. If we have time at the end, we'll answer the questions at that time. If we run out of time, we'll email you answers afterwards. We're also recording today's webinar. You will receive a recording and an email following the event. We have two very experienced speakers with us today, and I'd like to introduce them. Carolyn Norton is Director of Cloud Engineering and Operations with Velosio. She has over 15 years of industry experience, with 6 of those focused on implementing and managing cloud operations for clients. Daryl Mall is Principal Cloud Architect at Velosio. He has over 20 years of IT experience, with over 14 of those focused on cloud technologies. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Carolyn, who's going to get a deep dive into how technology can be used to increase protection from cybersecurity and ransomware attacks. Carolyn, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about our agenda today. So we're going to take the opportunity to just talk about ransomware and cybersecurity and where it is today. What are organizations failing to do, and why are they still a major target for these opportunities? And then we want to take the opportunity to highlight all of the tool sets that are important inside the Microsoft ecosystem that can help support organizations and their journey into mitigating these risks and having a stronger security posture. And then we want to deep dive into some best practices and some ransomware tools, cybersecurity tools that's going to help an organization on that journey. And then, as mentioned earlier, we'll have an opportunity, if there's time, for some Q&A. So let's talk about where we are today. Cybersecurity authorities in the US, in Australia, and the UK have noticed an increase of ransomware incidents around organizations globally. We know that cybercrime comes at a hefty cost. The FBI's 2021 Internet Crime Report found that there is a potential loss of $6.9 billion just in 2021 alone. And given that ransomware and cyber crimes yield significant gains for malicious threat actors, ransomware as a service has really taken off. These activities have been so successful that cyber criminals have even modeled as a service offering to help others join in on the fun of attacking organizations. If a threat actor really wants to, they can get in on the game, use the ransomware as a service, and use even kits that have been made available in the dark web, some even for free, which is a scary thought given that now it's expanded beyond just a subset of malicious actors attacking organizations, but really anyone is able to join in and cause havoc on organizations. So with that, when knowing what's going on today and that in mind, why is it that this is still a prevalent issue? It may surprise you that 80% of ransomware attacks and cyber crimes in general are still done through tried and true methodologies and tactics. They use common issues as their way into organizations. These actors are not using new techniques, and they're still getting great success in getting into organizations that have configuration errors. They're not patching or addressing applications or software vulnerabilities. And identity and credential hygiene is still a big factor that they can leverage to get in. And these are just a few of the common aspects that organizations still do not have a strong position on that they take advantage of. So let's talk about the Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah, Carolyn. I mean, as you can see from this slide, and I'm sure as many of you already know, Microsoft has an extremely broad portfolio of offerings. This makes the Microsoft ecosystem and all these offerings a very high value threat target to a lot of these bad actors, with offerings ranging from Microsoft 365 and productivity suites that go from the end user's desktop and the end user all the way to Dynamics 365, whether it be the ERP offerings or the CRM offerings, and SaaS solutions, to the vast array of numerous Azure services that are out there, as well as the rest of the portfolio. Microsoft has a touch point to these end users, and more importantly, their business data everywhere and anywhere. So really going across the whole, threat metrics and everything that Microsoft has, Microsoft sees it as a very key point to protect these, the data that is stored and utilized by all of these different systems, as well as the, the identities and the people utilizing all of these different systems for them. If we move on, Microsoft has a huge investment in cybersecurity. As you can see there, $1 billion a year, 3,500 plus security experts, and more certifications than any other major cloud provider. Microsoft has, gains deep insights into the ever-evolving landscape of these threat actors by analyzing more than 43 trillion, that's trillion with a T, threat signals on a daily basis. Just take 1 second to just fathom that. 43 trillion threat signals on every day. They have thousands and thousands of experts that are doing this across many different roles. So they have threat hunters, they have forensic investigators, they have malware engineers that are reverse engineering malware, and just researchers doing threat intelligence, so that the AI that is utilized on an automated basis in all of their tool sets are as keen and good as possible. They specialize in these dedicated areas just for that reason, so that they are specialists. They know what what is most important in their area, and they know what to look for and what to what can be ignored. Because as you can imagine, with 43 trillion signals in a daily basis, a lot of them are false positives or not as important as the other ones, but you have to weed through all 43 trillion to get to what's important. Microsoft focuses on gathering this intelligence about these, about their behaviors and about what tactics they're using, what tool sets they're using, and how they're going about, getting into these things, and how they're ever evolving on a daily basis, so that Microsoft can evolve its tool sets and its policies and procedures, and the way they're acting against these threat actors on a daily basis, because it's an ever evolving and ever moving target. They understand the myriad of tasks that are necessary to, grow a business and operate a business, and then they turn around and make sure that, while they enable that growth and the ability for companies to do business, they're also protecting those organizations at the same time with, as little investment as possible from the business standpoint, as far as that goes. Their whole goal is to protect the people that do business with their tool sets and their software applications. And Microsoft, you've seen it in the news where they've actually gone through and cooperated with government officials and went through and preemptively shut down ransomware, groups of ransomware gangs and different things like that. As you can see, going forward, all of this effort and all of this investment has really been recognized. You'll see lots of different Gartner reports and different things like that, as far as where they're in the leader, quadrant, in that magic quadrant. But the key pillars that as you're going through and protecting against these areas, the key leadership areas that we're really focused on is identity and access management, compliance, and enterprise archiving and compliance, and then endpoint protection and endpoint management. The biggest of these obviously is identity and access management. If you protect the identity, you really reduce the amount and the foothold and the ability for threat actors to be able to do what they need to do. So the key, one of the largest keys to preventing ransomware is protecting that identity, and Microsoft does a lot of work to enable identity protection and then identification of any fraudulent activities going on with the identities. Having a solid protection and archival scheme, is a kind of a key component to that compliance certifications that go along. And Azure, as noted before, Azure has more compliance certifications than any other major cloud provider. And in doing so and following along with those compliance standards, you're reducing the attack surface that bad actors can utilize and pose threats against. The last two pillars, kind of go hand in hand, which is endpoint management and endpoint protection. They have a lot of tool sets that are Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and Intune and different tool sets like that. And really, they have their own security ecosystem that works together to protect the whole ecosystem of the rest of the suite that Microsoft provides. But protecting the endpoint is, and endpoint management is really the boots on the ground and front lines of the battle against ransomware and threat actors, because that's protecting the end users and going through and keeping them from doing the malicious activities, and you're trying to prevent the malicious activities. And after you've protected the identity and mitigated that threat, that really goes a long way to protecting against the threat actions that they're trying to pose against you. As you can see from the next slide, all this effort again has been recognized by Gartner in the aspect that they are in the Magic Quadrant and leader in the leader quadrant in the Magic Quadrant for identity and access management, enterprise information archiving, endpoint protection, and endpoint management. Again, this is just further validation that Microsoft not only understands the key pieces that are necessary to have a holistic protection offering, but it also takes that seriously and is doing the right things to put those out in front of to the end users and the businesses that utilize their software.
So Microsoft obviously understands what's going on in the landscape today in terms of technology, but how does Microsoft really take all of that information, the trillions, as Daryl mentioned, trillion threat signals that they receive daily, and how do they incorporate that into solutions and or tools that organizations can leverage to make sure that they're protecting the assets, their services, what have you, so that the organization can be that much more secure. And taking a step back, a lot of this focus was placed into Azure. Now, we all know that the cloud is meant to scale and be agile and flexible and modern. And building upon that, Microsoft leveraged the Azure backend to create application and services that's going to help support both today's current landscape, but also future state. The signals are constantly changing. The movements can be varying, whether it's day to day, week, month, yearly, and so on. And so the power of the Azure cloud allows them to take that information and be that much more nimble and reactive and proactive when events are happening and signals are occurring, where they can make those best decisions. One of the best reasons to use Azure for these services, along with why Microsoft has done it, is that it exposes all of the services that Microsoft has created with the information, all the different aspects that one would need to protect for an organization, and have access to these tool sets. Versus on-premise and or other scenarios can make it a little bit more daunting or less quick to adopt these tool sets because it's in the old-fashioned traditional model versus modern. These tool sets and the capabilities that Microsoft have created make sure that Microsoft is able to provide the ability to have integrity, high availability, security of their customers' data, and be able to use that telemetry to make these decisions properly, to create these security services to meet the need. Basically trying to say they want to make sure that they can give you the tool set to secure, detect, and respond. So Daryl mentioned earlier that identity is central to most of these concepts. Your identity is one of the most important areas to protect, and managing these identities is also part and parcel. Who are you? What do you have access to? What should you be able to do and see? Identities or logins, whatever you want to call them, are part of our everyday lives. It gives us access to anything we need. We use them to access email. We use them to authenticate to services. We use them in our day-to-day scenario. So it has become that much important to provide some protection on who you are. And so Azure Active Directory is the centralized point of identities first and foremost. That's where they get created. That's where they get defined. And then from there, Microsoft has provided, again, modern tool sets to be able to further protect your identity, to give end users the ability to say, this is who I am, this is how I confirm who I am. And for organizations, they can control and understand the behaviors of the person that's authenticating in, which is also part and parcel because you want to make sure that access management is key. Now, if you're familiar with identity management in the traditional sense, you know that it can be cumbersome to track in organizations user base and what access do they have, what should they be looking at, when can they be able to look at these things. There's a lot of overhead that existed in the traditional model, whereas in Azure Active Directory, and in the next slide I'll point out another tool set, gives organizations a little bit more of a prescriptive response to a user's behavior. So when something happens, do this, allow them to do that, and that way there's less hands-on, but you know you have control and comfort that users are able to traverse whatever it is that they need safely and securely. Now, recently, Microsoft introduced a product line called, or a solution set called Entra. And what Entra does is it takes Azure Active Directory a step further and really looks at it holistically. One of the most important areas we talked about protecting is identity, but it's not just identities. It's not just about logons. It's also about access as well. Our digital presence is everywhere, and so how do you use this tool set to understand beyond just Azure Active Directory? How does it work with people that are outside of your organization that need access to your services and vice versa? How do you effectively manage what permissions are effectively given out, how they're being leveraged, and what's actually occurring? And then how do you really truly verify that that person is truly who they are? So that way, again, they are who they say they are, and there's further protection behind the identity. And the nice thing about Microsoft Entra, and what Microsoft tends to do with their tool set is, while yes, it's mostly focused in the Microsoft ecosystem, it is not just meant to live contained in the Microsoft ecosystem. So when they design these services and these tool sets, and of course the benefit of being in the cloud is that you can also use the tool sets to go beyond and go into on-premises resources, third-party resources, as I mentioned earlier, collaborating with other identity tools. So that way there's a unified area, a dashboard, a portal where you can see what all is going on with that identity, no matter what's going on, and give you signals and insights on what's going on in your organization. And ideally you make decisions based on the behaviors, or you would create policies and parameters around the behaviors.
That's great, Carolyn. You know, in looking at the holistic protection policy and things, you know, one of the biggest pieces and one of the biggest things that you'll hear with ransomware is when, not if, and other stuff like that. And you know, when it happens, one of the biggest things that you need to be able to fall back on, and one of the biggest things that protects you from, you know, possibly your organization possibly having to pay, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, you know, is a good and robust backup strategy. You know, Azure Backup has the ability of, you know, not only backing up your on-premise workloads, but workloads in other locations, in other data centers, and also obviously all of your Azure, you know, resources. And, you know, in addition to just the traditional like Azure VMs and the infrastructure as a service, you also have, you know, Azure file shares and storage accounts, and, you know, the platform as a service databases. All of those have the ability of, you know, being backed up by Azure Backup. Going through that, you know, it gives you that offsite backup, and it also has protection policies against things like threat actors and ransomware, because you can have multi-stage approvals for things like deletion of data. And once that data is there, it can't be, you know, accessed to the point where it's read-only. It can't be written to and you know, encrypted or anything along those lines. So, you know, once you have that multi-stage approach and different levels of approach approvals needed to, you know, truly delete backups and go through and do anything, you know, that gives you an extra layer of protection, in addition to the fact that you have, you know, with the cloud, you have the redundancy options of, you know, locally redundant storage, geo-redundant storage, or zone redundant storage. You know, there's multiple options. So whether or not you're talking about an on-premise workload or a workload that's already in Azure, you know, there's lots of different options as far as going through protection, and lots of different workloads that you can, you know, get and protected against with Azure Backup. And the nice thing about it is it's a very centralized management console, so you can see all of those different workloads across the different locations and the different workloads in a single place, apply policies to them so that you can make sure that, you know, things are happening on a regular basis, and when something goes bump in the night and something doesn't happen the way it is, you're going to get an alert, you're going to see it, and you're going to be notified of it, so that you can kind of, you know, set it and forget it, and have as much automation as possible to being able to ensure that everything's in the right place and doing the right things, and that you know when it's not. Speaking of, you know, things in the right place and knowing when it's not, you know, Azure Sentinel is a SIEM solution, so, you know, security information and event management solution. It's one of the first, you know, cloud native SIEM solutions from the, you know, the major cloud providers. You know, and the whole concept of this is, you know, collecting data at scale. So this is looking across your whole landscape of all your different endpoints, of all your different items and all your different people, and pushing that log information from every endpoint, from every user, from everything that they touch, into a single centralized place, and then having all of that information parsed through with utilizing AI and ML, and giving you, you know, the ability to have visibility into what's going on in your organization. You know, in doing it this way, you know, you have the, you know, you have the benefits of the AI training and the ML training that, you know, that Microsoft has with their threat intelligence of those 43 trillion signals on a daily basis. Every day it's getting better. Every day it's learning more. Every day it's, you know, figuring out new attack vectors and threat vectors that they're attacking against, so that it can minimize those false positives and weed out all the, you know, the millions, billions, and trillions of you know, signals that are coming in that you don't have to worry about, and only fronting and facing you with the ones that you do have to worry about. Once it does all of that utilizing AI, and it gets you to the point where you can then, you know, investigate what's going on and validate and see what's going on, and come to the conclusion that, hey, there is something going on that needs to be done and remediated. And then it gives you the ability to respond rapidly to those threats and be able to do it, you know, with in a rapid fashion, to the ability that you don't have as much work to do to get to remediate that issue, whether it be segregating an endpoint, whether it be, you know, forcing a user out of all connections, all sorts of different things can be done on, in a fairly automated basis in response to, different threats that are identified by Azure Sentinel. But the key here, again, with Azure Sentinel is it goes through and it gives you the ability of collecting data from all different data sources, detecting stuff that was previously undetectable before because you didn't have all of this data in a single location. You weren't able to correlate the different pieces of data together and put all of this together and say, hey, they're going from A to B to C because you were looking at A and then you didn't notice it with all the millions of records that you went to when you looked at B, and furthermore. It gives you the ability of investigating it across it, and then in a rapid response manner responding to those threats. Excuse me. Kind of on the same basis as the Azure Sentinel, you have Microsoft Purview. Now, Microsoft Purview is a somewhat newer name to a lot of technologies that have somewhat been around for a while. But what Purview does is it's really acting at the data layer. So there's an important piece of protecting the identity against anything happening, but at the core of everything is the company's data. That is the gold of today's world and today's business world is the company's data. That's where the value of each company is. Purview is a unified data governance platform that covers your entire data estate. So whether or not it's in SharePoint Online, whether or not it's on-premise in a file share or in SharePoint on-premise, all of that data is discoverable and viewable, and you can build it into a data map that it gives you the ability of then applying the different policies and the different tags against those to be able to protect your data. So this is a key component of all of the security and compliance standards. It plays a huge role in all of that. So things like HIPAA, ISO, GDPR, all of those. Microsoft has built-in policies for each and every one of those compliance standards, and as those get updated, obviously those policies get updated so that you can stay in compliance. But then you also have the ability of doing your own custom work and and custom policies as far as that goes, and that can go to Azure Information Protection policies. Those can go to DLP, data loss prevention policies, or communication policies. This can protect your data and basically make it easy for data to be shared from one organization to another. So if you have business partners and stuff like that, Purview gives you the ability of basically sharing information without necessarily that data leaving the organization. So you can share that data without having duplicate copies of spreadsheets or different things like that all over the place. And it really takes that least permission standpoint and gives the ability to the right users to do the right things at the right times without the ability of them to having too many permissions at all the wrong times, which really cuts down on the attack surface. And the biggest piece is it gives you a nice bird's eye view of all of this data across all of your your business's estate. So whether or not you're a global organization and you have locations all around the world, to a single location, but you may have two file servers, a SharePoint server, and stuff in SharePoint Online. You may have copies of data in multiple different places. You're going to get that view of that and have the ability of protecting and consolidating that data with Microsoft Purview. Moving on, the next piece where they offer protection is so we've gone through the identity, we've gone through the data. This is along the lines of the the servers themselves and the application servers and different things like that. So in that infrastructure and in the servers and hardware and resources that are utilized to operate the business on a daily basis, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, whether it's on-premise and through the inclusion of Azure Arc, or through Arc, or if it's a true Azure native VM or service, it gives you the ability to continually assess all of these workloads and all of these resources for security. Again, in compliance with whatever pieces are match up to the different compliance standards. Enables you to protect those resources and continuously assess them in an automated manner so that you have the ability of seeing what the highest security threats are right in your face, right up in front, across your whole landscape. You can continually assess. You can then take action and secure those down with, recommendations. You can defend against threats, by further securing them and/or recognizing and being alerted on threats that are happening against different servers, like denial of service or identity, password hash attacks and different things like that. And then it gives you, a nice little, measuring stick as far as that goes in the secure scores and recommendations on how you can raise that secure score. And you can also see relevant information as to how, your secure score it relates to, the high basic or aggregate secure scores of other organizations. And the biggest piece with Microsoft Defender is those alerts. So in addition to securing your your resources and increasing the security of those resources, anytime anything goes bump in the night, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which by the way can work in concert with Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft Purview, it gives you those alerts of anything going bump in the night. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces, kind of around this whole webinar, is the fact that there is a whole ecosystem of what Microsoft has to protect you, and it's a better together, type of relationship across the board, in that all of these tools, do a great job in and of themselves of what they're supposed to do, but when they work together in concert, that's where you get the massive, protection.
And taking that a step further, we talked about identities being a critical and important area to protect, but we know that productivity, aka email, chats, and so on, is still the major communication means for many organizations. As the years have evolved, we've become familiar with spam and attachments that are not really what they're supposed to be. And so, again, using the intelligence, the information that the team at Microsoft has been able to ingest, they've created a focal point on Microsoft 365, a specific defender for Microsoft 365. What I know most organizations think immediately is, why do I need to protect M365? It should already have protection. And while that's correct, and that is so, there are many baseline protection tools already inclusive in the productivity suite. Defender takes it a step further. Defender for Office 365 is advanced threat protection. So what it does is it goes a step further beyond email, beyond just the rudimentary communication path, and really focuses in on the collaboration tools. Issues like phishing, malware attacks, malicious file attachments, and even malicious links are that much of a deeper dive that Defender for Microsoft 365 has to offer. And it's also able to, very much like the other tool sets, it's also able to acknowledge trends, identify incidents, and give awareness to what's going on through the communication channels. Again, the primary channel that most organizations use to communicate both internally and also with their vendors. So Defender for Cloud is a really wonderful tool set here that gives, at a minimum, an organization that much of a greater protection to their external presence, while being able to give them the insights that, again, is going to help your organization determine what users are really being attacked, which ones are being actively penetrated or looking to be penetrated, which ones are at risk, which ones do you need to give a little bit more safety and control over, what's going on, what is flooding your communication paths, and what can you do to mitigate that. So those insights really help an organization not only understand what's going on in the communications channel, but also make those effective decisions. And so everything that we talked about so far all of these threat signals that have been coming to Microsoft is really what has influenced and driven these tool sets, these services that Microsoft is providing in Azure so that organizations can leverage these tools based on information that's being sent in to Microsoft so that they can hone in and protect, areas of their organization. Whether it's starting off with the most critical key services first and iterating off of that, or jumping into covering everything all at once, making sure that the major pillars are being protected, which we mentioned earlier, so that way your organization is that much more secure. Now, Microsoft created what they call DART, a team of folks. Daryl mentioned it earlier. They're the ones that are investigating, reviewing, and influencing conversations on security as a whole. And they put together a site, a blog that shares those insights, provides insight into the latest attacks, and just common best practices for security as a whole. We realize, and I'm sure Microsoft realizes as well, while they have a large tool set offering that organizations can leverage, it can be a little daunting to think about how you're going to start your journey. And so these blog posts help to serve, at a minimum, inform you, give you insights, give you expertise, and really knowledge share what Microsoft's learning, so you're able to make some educated decisions on how you want to take care of your organization.
Yeah, and these are the people that are on the front lines. These are the people that are, actively on a daily basis, dealing with the threat by actors and going through, and so they have that firsthand knowledge, and they have that deep, intimate knowledge of what's required and what they see would be the best protection methods. You can move on, Carolyn. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. And so what we'd like to do is just give you a takeaway here. We have experienced, Daryl and I have experienced, unfortunately, organizations that have suffered. And I'm sure you probably could think of other organizations that have some form or issue where they've been attacked or compromised in some form or fashion. And so just taking the opportunity, ideally before it happens, but if it happens, know that there's an opportunity to remediate the situation. Ideally, we want to avoid feeding the cyber criminals what they're looking for, which is they're attacking organizations no matter what size, so that they can get funds for their malicious acts. And unfortunately, as organizations continue to pay, and with a 50-50 chance that they'd actually come back online, it just encourages this bad behavior. And so examples like this, where we've helped organizations who unfortunately have experienced an attack, we were able to remedy the issue by putting them in a secure environment, leveraging these Microsoft tool sets to get them at a stronger security posture. And then from there, we can begin to start that journey of what else can we protect? What other areas are at risk, so that we're not ignoring or missing any areas of opportunity for security.
Yeah, we have a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of examples going through. I mean, there's two, we have two here, just to kind of outline some of the stuff that we've done and seen as far as that goes. But there's, unfortunately, with our large client base, we run into this on a fair to regularly basis as far as that goes. In looking at, the things that, we can utilize and the different commonalities that we can utilize to then protect, the basic hygiene of, what we're looking at to protect against these pieces. If you want to go forward, Carolyn, I know we're cutting it close on time here. But those basic hygiene tasks that, you can utilize to, cut down dramatically. Here we have 98% of attacks. I mean, everybody's top of the list is multi-factor authentication. that, you know, and a lot of people will, you know, you'll hear the argument that MFA isn't perfect. Yeah, it isn't perfect. There are ways to, you know, get in and, you know, and hack MFA and go that route, but it's more about, you know, the speed bumps in the parking lot trying to slow people down. Are people still, you know, are there people that are still gonna, you know, take it too fast? Yes, but you're just trying to, you know, mitigate the vast majority and make it a lot harder. You know, a lot of these pieces are not meant to necessarily 100% protection rate, but we're trying to, you know, get it up there as high as possible to really deter and make it more difficult, which also makes it more possible to detect these in the process, which then gives you the ability of shutting things down.
And these are the areas that again is commonly leveraged for malicious actors to abuse and get into the organization. So once you start to button up these holes and really get yourself in a really immune state, again, it's not like nothing's perfect, but the point is to build up that immunity so that you're not an easy target and you're not going to be the one that they're going to win in terms of what they're trying to do next.
Yep. So I mean, we have, again here, going through the top 5, multi-factor authentication really cuts down on the ability of somebody being able to, you know, once they get a identity, being able to do anything with it. Least privilege access is, you know, for, you know, that zero trust security model, you know, only giving people the ability to do what they need to do when they need to do it. Keeping up to date with good patch management. Obviously, there's a lot of different software applications and operating systems out there. Making sure that you are at least, you know, up to date with everything patched that those people who wrote those applications know about makes the most sense. Utilizing a good anti-malware XDR platform and protecting your data, which is the goal of every, the golden value of every, you know, organization out there.
So I know we talked about the tool sets at a high level, and we anticipate more opportunities to really deep dive into each one and what those look like for organizations and the benefits of leveraging them. But Daryl and I would love to thank you for spending time with us and just understanding the wide range of tool sets that Microsoft provides that can really help organizations protect themselves and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, like as Pamela mentioned, reach out if there's any interest in, you know, another webinar series or another follow-up with a more detailed, you know, breakout of any one of these tool sets. Maybe we can do a live demo. How about that, Carolyn?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Okay, thanks. I just want to wrap it up real quick. Thanks to Carolyn and Daryl. Excellent coverage of that very important topic. And again, their contact information is below there. And we thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.